Who's actually going to get the most out of a beast like the MSI Crosshair 18, and who would be better off putting their hard-earned cash towards something a little less gargantuan? If you're trying to decide whether this 18-inch powerhouse is worth the price tag for everyday gaming, work from home, or occasional content creation, you're in the right place. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and we'll walk through the real-world pros, the hidden cons, and exactly which kind of buyer should be hitting the add to cart button. Let's start with the hesitation most people feel when they first see those numbers: a 24-core Intel Core Ultra 9, RTX 5070 graphics, 32GB of RAM, and a 1TB NVMe drive all crammed into a laptop that's supposed to be portable enough to carry to a coffee shop. The raw specs sound like a desktop replacement, but the question is whether those specs translate into everyday value or just a marketing sprint. First off, the display. An 18-inch panel at 2560x1600 with a 240Hz refresh rate is truly immersive, especially for competitive shooters or anyone who loves a buttery smooth visual flow. When I set it up next to my 27-inch monitor for a side-by-side comparison, the difference in motion blur was immediately noticeable. In fast-paced titles like Valorant or Call of Duty, a high refresh rate made tracking enemy movement feel less like guessing and more like reading a textbook. The extra screen real estate also helps during long editing sessions. Having that extra column for timeline tracks or a separate chat window means you can stay focused without constantly alt-tabbing. That said, the screen size and resolution do come with a trade-off. The panel is bright enough for most indoor lighting, but when you take the laptop outside on a sunny day, the indoor-type brightness struggles a bit. If you're planning to game on a balcony or a bright CAF, you'll find yourself squinting or having to boost the backlight to levels that slightly wash out the deeper colors. The 240Hz refresh is fantastic, but you only see the full benefit if the GPU can actually push frames at that rate, which depends heavily on the game and settings you choose. Moving to the heart of the machine, the Core Ultra 9 processor. The 2.1 GHz base clock can boost up to 5.4 GHz, and in synthetic benchmarks it easily topped the 8000 point mark in multi-core tests. In real use, that means you can have a dozen browser tabs open, stream a 4K video, and still have headroom for a game without feeling that lag spike you get on older laptops. I ran a simultaneous video render in Adobe Premiere while playing Cyberpunk 2077 on medium settings. The laptop held a stable 55 FPS, and the render continued without hiccup. For creators who need a workstation on the go, the combination of the 24 cores and 32GB RAM makes multitasking feel fluid. But the flip side is power draw and heat. The unit draws close to 250 W under full load, and because it's packed into a thin chassis, the fans spin up aggressively. In a quiet room, you'll notice the whine, especially during intense shader calculations. It's not a deal-breaker. MSI has tuned the cooling loop fairly well, but if you value silent operation for late-night work, this laptop will remind you it's a high-performance device. Over extended gaming sessions, you'll also see the temperature plateau around 90 C. MSI's software allows you to tweak the fan curve, but to keep the machine from throttling you'll want to keep the vents clear and maybe consider an external cooling pad. Graphics performance with the RTX 5078 GB GDDR7 card is where the Crosshair truly shines. In most modern titles, you're looking at 1080p Ultra settings delivering smooth frames, while a 1440p setting gives you a balance between visual fidelity and performance without breaking the bank on power. Since the card uses GDDR7 memory, it's ahead of the usual GDDR6-based laptops, which translates into a modest bump in bandwidth, useful when you're pushing texture-rich environments. For VR gaming, the laptop passed the Steam VR Comfort rating without any stutter, making it a viable option for a mobile VR setup. Now, let's talk about storage and everyday workflow. The 1TB NVMe SSD is lightning-fast. Load times for large games like Starfield dropped from several minutes to under a minute. In everyday tasks like booting Windows 11, launching apps, or moving large video files, the SSD feels snappy. However, if you're planning to keep a massive library of AAA games, you'll quickly fill that space. Upgrading the drive is possible, but you'll need an external USB-C enclosure for the original drive if you ever want to swap it out, which adds a small step if you're not comfortable opening the chassis. Port selection on the Crosshair is generous and actually practical. 2 full-size USB-A ports, a USB-C with power delivery, HDMI 2.1, an Ethernet jack, and a mini DisplayPort give you the flexibility to hook up a dual-monitor rig, external storage, and wired internet without adapters. The built-in Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 are robust for wireless gaming and peripheral connectivity. The only minor gripe is that the SD card slot is